take a look at the June meeting. If folks have a chance to.
Yeah, could I ask a question? Just in reading them, when it talked about, I think on the second page about approved the amendment unanimously, I just wanted to be sure the way it reads, the two paragraphs before that, it almost sounds as if we had an opinion on the missing mill, and we didn't. I mean, it's related, but we weren't asked, and we didn't have an opinion on the missing mill. And I was wondering if we might just make that statement that neither asked nor did we have an opinion on such a hot topic, because we just don't need to get into that mess.
Right. So is that something we can amend?
That's my motion.
Do we have a second?
It's going to die on the bottom.
I'll second.
Oh, sorry.
Right. I think we're approved to add that minutes.
Thank you.
Any other comments?
Oh, I'm sorry. There was one. I was just going to on number 5 there. I think there's an extra line. Annual report is listed twice. It's annual report period. Annual report.
Okay. Thank you.
Sorry for the approved minutes with the corrections.
Yeah, so there's one typo, and then there's also a sort of disclaimer sentence you all want to add that basically says we did not weigh in on this or something.
Okay.
So I think just to clarify that part of the minutes, I guess I'll try to make it a little bit more clear, but you guys weren't necessarily weighing in on the missing middle, but it was the consideration of the amendment to our consolidated plan, so I'll just spell that out more clearly in the minutes.
Hi, Mike.
Look.
So Mike is a guest, but formerly a CDCAC member, so you know the
Yes.
drill.
Exactly, yes.
And Margaret is here too, Caitlin.
Hey there.
Welcome. It is cozy.
And I also
Sorry for the cozy space tonight.
Yeah, it's a little awkward. Should I scoot back? I think I'll live on this
I was gonna
side.
say, I can sit in the back here and.
You can hang out.
Yeah, I can
I
just
think
hang
we're
out.
only expecting one more in
In the
person.
corner.
Right, so I think you can forgive me for doing business on my phone. Next up, we have the FY 2025 HUD Action Plan Public Hearing.
All right, and that's going to be me. I will share my screen. I guess, are there any members of the public that have, other than Mike, present at the meeting so far? Okay. So I'm just going to give a quick overview of sort of what just as a refresher about what the action plan needs hearing is, just so that we're all on the same page. I think, typically when we do these, it's kind of, it depends on whether members of the public actually show up to comment on the needs and the priorities identified in our action plan. But I think it makes sense for CDCAC to weigh in and kind of think through whether we need to be making any changes or, how we want to move forward with our action plan priorities for the next, for 2025. So with that, I'm going to go quickly through these slides. So the action plan, it's an annual planning document required by HUD, and it basically is a 1-year plan that describes to HUD how we're going to meet the goals of our consolidated plan, which is a 5-year planning document. We use it as a policy document for our other funding sources, so CSBG, and then our Affordable Housing Investment Fund Housing Services grants. So as a refresher, the 4 consolidated plan goals are to create and sustain affordable rental and homeownership housing, promote healthy and self-sufficient families, stabilize families at risk of homelessness, and foster vibrant and sustainable neighborhoods. So the items that are kind of described in the action plan are first being action. So what are we going to do with our federal funding over the program year? Various activities within those actions. So it's just sort of describing how exactly those actions are going to be carried out, what resources are going to be used, so the funding sources that are going to be used to support those activities, and the various performance measures that are going to be used to indicate whether the activities that we are funding are meeting their stated goals. So how do we develop it? So we hold this needs hearing in September. And this is really a good chance for us to talk about whether the county's, the needs of the community have changed, whether we should be adjusting our action plan priorities or considering alternative priorities in the coming program year. And then once we get into October through December, this is when we really start, as you know, reviewing applications and considering how applications will work towards meeting the goals of our consolidated plan. We ask for community input on the action plan once it's drafted in February through March. So that will be next February through March. CDCAC then holds a hearing on the action plan in March, and then the county board considers both the budget recommendations and the action plan at the, actually that should say April, not March, but at the April board meeting. So I guess with that, first I want to open it up to the committee to see if you have any questions about what was just discussed, but also just open it up for feedback about, what you, if I'll go back to the two questions, if we should be considering additional priorities or whether the community's needs have changed over the last year. So I'm going to stop there.
Comments? Right. Doesn't look like we have any in the room. Anybody online?
A lot of people. Sorry, let me.
Right.
So I showed the 4 goals of the consolidated plan, but basically, affordable housing is obviously something that continues to be an issue. Homelessness is something that we fund some. The economic self-sufficiency is something that really a lot of the grants that you all support are that goal, promote healthy and self-sufficient families. So that's a lot of the stuff that's funded that might be youth programs or senior programs or after school programs, all that kind of stuff. And then the foster vibrant and sustainable neighborhoods is the stuff around community outreach and that kind of thing. So just that's sort of a reminder, those are and they're pretty broad. So, are we still covering everything? Are we missing anything? And I see Tim has his hand up.
Oh yeah, no, hey Jennifer, thanks. I was just curious if I think it seems like to me that one of the big challenges that we're facing is around mental health, and I mean I've been doing this for a little while. I don't recall us ever really seeing a lot of grants around supporting mental health and mental health services. Is that something that maybe we want to try to emphasize, and is that something that would fit perhaps under the stabilizing households, or where would that go? Maybe healthy and self-sufficient families. I'm just curious because that's really where the challenge seems to be.
Agreed. Yeah, we don't have that as a specific strategy, and I think the reason is because this funding is really kind of focused, and we try to focus on sort of economic self-sufficiency, so the tools for people to be able to live in their housing, whereas the Department of Human Services, their funding tends on the mental health side, but that's not to say we couldn't address both, I guess. I don't know, Caitlin, do you have any?
Yeah, I think that we could definitely consider grant applications if they came in, that support mental health programming. We have one priority within the 4 goals that is around sort of like healthy, like supporting just sort of health in general. So that's how we qualify the dental programs. So I think it could fit in there if we did, if there was an application that came in. But of course, that is all sort of dependent on whether an organization applies for funding for a specific program.
Yeah, no, I understand. It's really top of mind, especially with what's been going on. And our role is to be representative to the community, and what I'm seeing in the community right now, there is a real need for that more than ever before. So I was just curious, but thanks for taking my question. I'll be there shortly too.
Thanks.
And maybe that's an opportunity for us to kind of do some more outreach to nonprofits that support that issue in the future.
Wow, we cover everything.
Are there any other comments? Not hearing anything.
Not to put you on the spot, Walt, but I'm curious about the sort of from the human rights perspective. Because something that we find a lot is, we've been working a lot in this sort of fair housing area and don't get a lot of grant proposals in that area. Are there things on the human rights side that you think we should be focusing on, or organizations that potentially would?
Well, right now what they're focusing within the commission is updated some of the old laws are within. So the committee has been focusing a lot of time on that. I will bring back that to the committee when I'm there, and certainly it's something that I'm sure we would look into it, Jennifer.
Okay, thanks.
Right. So I think that brings us to the end of our second agenda item. So let's move on to the FY2020 paper, which is Consolidated Annual Performance and Evaluation Report.
Actually, wondering, would you mind shifting a little bit since we have our folks here from the Reeves project?
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. Since our guests are here, it might make sense to shift things around since I know it is pretty cozy in that room.
Do we know if Kristen Burr has joined via the Zoom?
I don't see that she has. Are we waiting on her?
Yeah, she's planning on joining via Zoom. We're just going to join her a little bit. But we can get started.
Actually, I mean, do you want to wait or what's? Y'all are here, but I don't know.
That would be nice if.
That's fine. We can wait until the other member shows up.
Yeah, that would be perfect.
Okay, great.
It's not, we can move forward, but that would be perfect.
Yeah, we were just trying to be flexible because y'all were here, but you're not all here. So.
All right, so let's take a look at the caper and then we'll move on to the Reeves project after that.
Okay. So we have a PowerPoint for that too. We have 10 million PowerPoints today. Thank you. Okay, so this is me. So can we go to the next slide, please? So what is the CAPER? Those of you who have been here for a long time, you know this. It's the Consolidated Annual Performance and Evaluation Report, which is a HUD acronym. And it's a required report that describes accomplishments and progress towards meeting the goals outlined in our consolidated plan and our 2023 annual action plan. So this is the report that reports on last fiscal year, began July 1st and ended June 30th, 2023. The CAPER reports on activities funded through all these various funding sources that you all are familiar with: CDBG, HOME, CSBG, TANF, and AHIP Housing Services. So those are all, mostly all, not so much HOME, but the other ones you all really review all the proposals, you track the project. So the CAPER kind of reports on all of those at the end of the year. So next slide, please. So part of it is an expenditure summary. So this is what we've expended this year. CDBG, it's listed under two categories just because that's how we report it in HUD. But essentially, we spent about $2 million in CDBG last year. We get about 1.3 million every year from HUD, but we do have unprogrammed and program income, so we do have more money than that every year. So that's what we ended up expending. In home, we get about 800,000 a year. We only spent about 122,000 last year because we didn't have a specific project. So that was really just for our administration costs. CSBG, which includes CSBG TNF, we spent 307. And then the AHIF, the Affordable Housing Investment Fund, as you all know, is the county's, mostly the county's brick and mortar program to build affordable housing. But the county board sets aside a certain amount to fund services. So last year we spent 106,000. So that was our total expenditure for last year. Next slide, please. So we have some highlights. The Community Development Fund supported 39 programs using a combination of all those funds. Donated volunteer hours, which, as you know, is something we ask people to track and we ask them sort of upfront, were valued at approximately almost 800,000, which is pretty cool. Subrecipients leveraged more than 10 points from other sources. So as you all remember, when you're reviewing proposals, you look to see what the leverage, what they plan to leverage, and then they report at the end of the year on what they've. So that's pretty good. So that's if we spent $2 million, that's what 5-to-1 leverage or something like that. We also wanted to highlight 2 housing development projects that were completed this year, Terwilliger Place and Cadence, which you all toured at the community development tour. Both received federal funding. It doesn't show up on our expenditure summary because the money was spent previously, but we don't actually count it until they're completed stuff. So that happened for both of them this year. So these projects between them contributed to the addition of 257 units to the county affordable housing portfolio. So we're really excited about that. Of those, 26 are for people who are at 30% of the area median, which is the lowest income households. And as you all know, those are the households that are really hardest to house, hardest to have supply for. We're pretty excited about that, so we wanted to highlight that this. Next slide, please. So I don't know how to do this. So that you see this every year. We do a big summary of all the programs and sort of expected and actual accomplishments, and it's sort of walk through every single one. How do we want to do this? Should I just? So this first goal is affordable housing. So this is the goal that's really looking at supply and rehab and renovation. So as I mentioned, Cadence and Terwilliger Place were big ones. Eco Action is the Energy Masters program that we've been funding for a number of years, Rebuilding Together, and LEDC, the homeownership program. So all of them, pretty much met or exceeded their goals. So should I stop for questions or should I just keep going and jump in, I guess? I'll keep going. All right, next slide, please. So economic self-sufficiency, as I mentioned, is a big goal and funds a bunch of our stuff. So again, I won't walk through all of them, but the strategies are to provide job training, skills development. As you can see, most of the organizations did pretty well this year. And with COVID, a lot of them did not do that well because it was challenging to get people there and to do the training and to pivot to virtual, but also people getting jobs was hard. So as you can see, it's pretty much back on track, I think. So that's good. Foster micro enterprise development. Those are the organizations that provide technical assistance and training and financing to entrepreneurs. I'm trying to think if there's any that are of interest. Some of them look lower, and I think it's because we counted differently. So for example, with EDG, they were gonna support 38 businesses, but they really support 9. And I think it's because we switched the way we counted. Is that right, Caitlin? Maybe not.
I don't think so. I think.
Never mind, scratch that.
I think, yeah, I'm not exactly sure. I need to go back and look and see what the reasoning behind the difference there was.
Okay, I was just curious.
So we've talked before about kind of all the reasons why the actuals might not match up with the proposed, and it's whether there's interest in starting up a business or kind of what kind of interest they get, or who needs assistance and that kind of thing, and what level of assistance they need.
And keep in mind, people come in with proposals almost 2 years before they're doing final reporting. So of course, things can change. So, all right. So reduce barriers to unemployment. That's quite a lot of organizations. The resident services programs that we support. AFA was Queens Court. The immigration legal services, which we fund several of those. Bugata's tenant outreach program, which is actually funded through our general fund. And then Arlington Thrive. That was the new sort of 2-year program to do child care outreach. So that's the outcomes for all of those. Questions, Ro?
And And I just remembered, I'm sorry, I'm very foggy today. But I just recalled the sort of difference between the businesses assisted, expected and actual. The reason is that in the expected column, I believe we're counting both businesses that received loans and also technical assistance. But on the actual side, we're reporting just the businesses that received a lending product for EDG and LEDC.
Thank you. Okay.
Because that's what HUD asked.
So building assets through financial literacy credit counseling, that was VCE Money Smarts Pay, which we have actual accomplishments. Did they finally report? Yay. They took a while. Sorry, did I say that out loud? Reducing barriers to equitable access to technology. That was a new goal in this consolidated plan. We've obviously with COVID, digital equity is a really important need. So there are 2 organizations that were funded and both were successful this year. Supporting increased educational attainment for low and moderate income families. So a lot of that is the school-based programs, as you can see, Project Discovery, Aspire, the Buckingham Youth Brigade, CIS Nova, EduFuturo, Liberty's Promise, and Wesley's Promising Futures Resident Services Program, which is really, a lot of it is focused on youth. So those all look, yeah, kind of what that they said they were going to do or exceeded. And then economic self-sufficiency, continuing with that, supporting increased access to health and community resources. So Tim, I guess this is where that would fit in. So that is about Arlington Neighborhood Village, which supports seniors. Our Stomping Ground, which supports people with intellectual disabilities in residence. Apple Resident Services, they did an expanded hours pilot. The Capital Youth Empowerment Program, Fathers in Touch program, which helps fathers to reduce their risk of abuse. Northern Virginia Dental Clinic and the Fenwick Foundation, which both do dental services programs. So as you can see, lots on the economic self-sufficiency side. So next slide, please. So in homelessness, and I will say my disclaimer here is the county is doing tons with homelessness, lots of money, lots of support, lots of programs. This is really just reporting on what was funded through the development fund. So if you want to look more broadly, you can read the entire paper, which is a several hundred-page document that does talk some more about some of the other programs that are supporting services. So that being said, these were funded through the Community Development Fund. Permanent supportive housing for Path Forward, which we've been funding for a number of years. Friends of Guest House to rapidly rehouse homeless women and support them in finding housing and employment. And then AHC's program that used to be their eviction prevention, and they're now calling homes, I forget what the acronym is, but the goal to prevent households from eviction. Next slide.
Quick question. So it showed the amount awarded, but is that the amount expended?
Not necessarily.
Okay.
So that is also in the, or we can share that with you if you like.
Okay.
Yeah. Tim. Next slide. So the last goal is neighborhood revitalization, and that is a lot of that is really county outreach programs. Jorge Lauda, who you all have met, a lot of what he does. So outreach, doing technical assistance, doing referrals for homeowners, for tenants, and improving neighborhoods through cleanup events. So there were 2 events that were held successfully in 2 neighborhoods to sort of help people get rid of stuff and declutter and that kind of thing. We also support a small grant program, which is we set aside $5,000 and award up to $1,000 to community-based organizations to do sort of community engagement. So this year we only had actually one that both applied and ended up spending the money, Centro de Apoyo Familiar. So that number was a little bit unusual. So next slide, please. So if you want additional information, this is the blurb that's on the website, and down below is which we can also send you. And I know you all have received this. If you want to read the citizen summary, which I sort of covered in the slides, but also the HUD, long and tedious, but if you'd like lots of details. So any questions? All right.
Next up, now we will turn to the Reeves Farmhouse project.
Okay. I don't know if Kristen has joined yet, but since we're at our original point in the agenda, we'll get started and hopefully we'll be able to join over the course of the conversation. We do have a slide deck, but I don't know if anyone was overlapped with me when I was on this committee, but I served on CDCAC. It's actually almost a decade ago now. Yes, yes. So for those that don't know me, I'm Mike Spots. I'm the Director of Real Estate for Habitat for Humanity, Washington, D.C. and Northern Virginia. So I definitely know what you all are about to embark on over the course of the next several Wednesdays over the course of the fall and reviewing community development fund applications. So good luck with all of that. I'm pleased to be here today on the other side of the table, so to speak, in my new role to talk about the Reeves Farmhouse Adaptive Reuse Project that Habitat is undertaking in partnership with Homemade of the National Capital Region and L'Arche of Greater Washington, D.C. I will introduce in more detail the partner organizations, but I also like to introduce Sarah Moore, who is with L'Arche, and she'll have an opportunity to talk a little bit more about L'Arche over the course of the presentation. Next slide, please. So I'm going to try and be quick to leave as much time as possible for Q&A. There's a lot we can talk about with this project, so we'll take it whatever. I'll be brief and at the high level and take it whatever direction you want to go to in Q&A. But I'll provide a little bit of information about the project background and who's doing what on the project. We'll spend a little bit more time talking about L'Arche because L'Arche is the group that's going to be operating the Reeves Farmhouse when the construction project is complete, and then we'll talk a little bit about the process and next steps. Go to the next slide, please. So what is the Reeves Farmhouse project? Well, the project team is going to be working to redevelop the historic Reeves Land Farmhouse with, for those that may not be familiar, it's on the top of the hill right outside of Bluemont Park, and it's currently owned by Arlington County, to create a home for adults with intellectual disabilities, referred to in L'Arche's parlance as core members and their caregivers. This is going to be a historic renovation combined with a historically compatible new addition that will house 4 core members, provide permanent housing for 4 core members and 2 living caregivers. And those 6 individuals will be living as a family, and this house will be a permanently supportive housing opportunity for core members in perpetuity. It's going to be perpetually affordable. Go to the next slide, please. A little bit of background about the Reeves Farmhouse itself and how this project evolved over time. This story actually began as far back as 1865 when the Reeves Torreyson Farm. There's a tenant house constructed on that property. That eventually that farm became the last operating dairy farm in Arlington County. Bits and pieces of that farm were sold off for subdivisions to the county for parkland. And in 2000, and that tenant house was eventually moved to the top of the hill. And there were lots of additions to the home itself to create a much larger structure that is there today. In 2001, when the last Reeves family member that was a resident of the home passed away, the Arlington County purchased the remaining lot, the house and the remaining lot, adding on to Bluemont Park. And over the course of the next 22 years and counting, the county's been trying to figure out what to do with this property. So that included the creation of a historic district, putting a historic easement on the lot itself, subdividing the lot and adding more land to Bluemont Park. And our respective organizations came in 2017 and over the course of 3 years, negotiated a letter of intent to develop the home as a home for L'Arche's core members. There's a pause during COVID, obviously, but now starting last fall, we've really kickstarted working with the county to move that project forward. Could we go to the next slide, please? So a little bit, just a quick note about the project team and structure and how the actual, who's doing what and why all 3 of us are at the table. So L'Arche is going to, so when the county moves forward with this project and gives its final blessing, I'll get more into that process in a minute, that property will be transferred to Habitat for Humanity during the construction phase. But when the project is done, L'Arche is going to be the owner and operator and neighbor to those that live in the Boulevard Manor community. They will be providing services, operating the home, maintaining the physical and financial viability of the property, etc. Homemade National Capital Region, for those of you that are unfamiliar with them, they're a nonprofit that works with the building sector and the building industry region to leverage the skills and capacity of trade partners to meet some of the toughest housing challenges that are faced in the region. So they're working with groups like L'Arche, with domestic violence shelters, with homeless shelters, to provide heavily discounted or in some cases fully donated construction materials and services so that the nonprofits can focus their capacities on actually providing the services and housing that is necessary to promote housing stability. So Homemade is a critical partner in this. They have secured the partnership of Toll Brothers, who will be serving as the general contractor of this project and will be coordinating with their own partners and trades and subs to build this project at a discount and with a lot of donated materials and services. So this project would not be possible without the partnership of Homemade National Capital Region. And our role is as the project manager. We are responsible for securing entitlements, approvals, funding, and bringing this project to fruition up through the construction phase. And so we're not going to be, this isn't a typical Habitat project where we're out there swinging hammers, but we've been meeting with the county and working with them to make sure that we can get the process started so that Homemade's partners can then construct the home. So with that, I will apologize for taking a little bit more time than I intended, but I'll pass it off to Sarah to talk a little bit about L'Arche. And L'Arche's work is why this project is eligible for community development funding for the funds. So I'll talk a little bit more about our project financials overall for the construction phase in a minute, but I wanted to give them an opportunity to introduce themselves and talk a little bit about their model.
Yeah, thanks everybody. I brought some other members of the L'Arche community. I have Bruce Weaver and Alice Felker. They live in one of our homes in South Arlington. I'll explain a little bit more about our presence in Arlington in a minute, but kind of essentially what L'Arche's goal and where we thrive is really just creating spaces for people with and without disabilities to share life together. That typically happens in our homes, but it also happens in the broader community and kind of fostering inclusion in Arlington and DC. Next slide. You might recognize a face there. There's Bruce and his friend Elizabeth. But L'Arche Greater Washington, DC was founded 40 years ago in 1983. But then we have two homes in Northwest Washington, DC. But then we opened two homes, or came to Arlington in 2006 in South Arlington. And essentially we provide family-based services to adults with disabilities. But we are more than that, we're community to hundreds of people. And as Alice and Bruce can attest to, our homes are places where we come for dinner, or we're going out in the community, to the library, to our church. We find that we are places for belonging for many more people than just those who receive services from L'Arche. We are a part of a much larger federation. L'Arche is internationally. There are 160 communities all over the world, originally starting in France and in 38 countries. So we're a part of a much bigger family of L'Arche. Next slide. And then I want to talk a little bit about how kind of functionally we operate, get our funding from, and where actually we are. So we have, like I mentioned, we have homes in South Arlington. They're right in what is the Arlington Heights neighborhood. So if you're familiar with Thomas Jefferson Middle School, we live right nearby. And we have 8 adults with disabilities services there, and many other assistants like Alice, who will live alongside Bruce and other members of the community in our homes. I think that L'Arche is really unique in our model of care because we are really kind of person-centered and focused on relationships more than the care that's provided. So our homes are places that feel very much like family homes. We have dinner together as an organization. We go to church in the neighborhood together for those that Bruce and I actually go to the same church, right, Bruce? Give you a ride to church sometimes. It feels very much like a family feel. We have very close ties to Arlington County as far as we have case managers. So we work closely with them and have been receive just every year really good reports and reviews about how our model care is making a difference. We don't like to throw our other peers under the bus, but some of the group homes in in our country are a little bit more institutionalized, where they're people kind of home. They don't really get out in the community much, and L'Arche just does integration in the community so naturally and so well that the county has asked for us to think about growing. Just model is something that's really working. There also is a major shortage of housing for people with intellectual disabilities, specifically in the state of Virginia. There's a waiting list of 12,000 people services through Medicaid, and I'm not exaggerating that number. It is, we get calls all the time for, like Bruce lived with his mom and dad for a long time, like 40, 50 years before, yes. And then they weren't able to give the same level of care, and so Bruce moved into a place like L'Arche. But there's just a lot of people looking for homes, and then quality homes as well. Right. So that's why we're really excited about the Reeves Farmhouse, because it provides more homes, and super excited about the partnership. So Mike and Habitat and Homemade is just a really great example of people coming together to meet a need. From a operational perspective, 2/3 of our budget comes from Medicaid waivers, and then but that's really bare bones what kind of services are provided. It's really kind of a roof over head and having someone to kind of watch over the people that live in the home. But we believe that everyone should have a big life, a full life, the life they want. And so the other third of our budget comes from fundraised donations, which allows people to go on vacations, or us to have a van and not have to rely on Metro access, which can sometimes be 2 hours late for an appointment. So there's a whole lot of expenses that are needed to make a big life and a full life. And so that's how L'Arche has answered that solution, is by doing fundraising. And then for our plans at Reeves Farmhouse, we are just so excited. We have been wanting to grow. Obviously, the cost of living in this area makes it hard to grow. To purchase a home, to make it fully accessible is a big challenge. Actually, the 2 homes we have in Arlington only have 2 fully accessible rooms in them, because the small lots that they're on didn't allow for any additions. So we've had to be really creative with what we have. So this Reeves Farmhouse will give 4 fully accessible rooms with this addition, which is a game changer in the type of care Alice can attest to. We have aging core members too. So people live at L'Arche for life, and as their needs change, they can't walk up the stairs like they, much younger. So in addition to the fully accessible home, we're also really excited about potential kind of program space in the home to welcome neighbors in, or to host kind of groups for people with disabilities, support groups, or activity groups. And then also there's already an existing garden that's run by community members that is connected to the local elementary school. So we see, lots of partnerships with the broader community through this project, which is, really exciting, because L'Arche has a strong outreach focus as well. So not only are we providing more housing, it also is just some really exciting outreach with our new neighbors in that neighborhood. Bruce, I want to make sure you have a chance to say anything about what your experience has been like at L'Arche.
I like cooking.
You like to cook? What do you like to cook?
Anytime.
Any kind?
Yes.
Yeah.
And I like to snack. And Giant, we went.
Go to Giant a lot? What do you like to buy at Giant?
Pop-Tart.
Pop-Tarts. Big Pop-Tart guy, right?
Or maybe what?
Pretzels you like?
Sometimes, yes.
Sometimes.
Or
Sunday night candy bars?
Yeah.
Bruce has a rule that every Sunday night he eats a candy bar. So I think it's a good rule.
Great.
Yeah.
And cereal.
And cereal every morning. Yeah, it's important. And Bruce is a lifelong Arlingtonian. I mean, he lived in a couple different places, but has lived in Arlington for a long time. His parents were strong advocates of Bruce and really involved in the community too. Back over to Mike.
Thanks, Sarah. So I'll be brief with this. So what you see on the right there as you're facing that is an artistic rendering of what the farmhouse will look like when complete. Landscaping might look a little bit different, but the house with the addition, that's what we anticipate it'll look like when finished. All of our designs are required to conform with the requirements of the historic district and the easement that was placed on the property. And we received our certificate of appropriateness from the Historic Affairs and Landmarks Review Board earlier this summer. We also have to comply with the provisions that were passed in 2015 before this project was envisioned as a supportive housing living environment as part of the Uniform Residential Development Permit process. So we're working on that and getting some additional approvals of the county board. And our proposed project capital funding includes those in-kind donations leveraged via the Home Aid Partnership, as well as philanthropic and fundraise contributions and community development fund resources. And those resources, all of these resources are so critical because we're looking to provide this house debt-free to L'Arche, so that all the money that they raise can be put right back into the programming and services for the people that will live there. And given how sparsely funded nationally, this is a national issue, that this type of housing and care is, that's why we believe it's critically important and why the Community Development Fund resources play such a critical role, or pending approval will hopefully play such a critical role in the success of this project. Our agreement with the county establishes fundraising targets. Pleased to say that we've hit and exceeded our interim benchmarks and are on track for hitting those targets that are required to receive the property and move forward. Next slide, please. And then finally, I'll just note that most of the work, there's a lot of different concurrent processes moving forward, from due diligence that's required as a part of the requirements of the Community Development Fund resources, including NEPA, Section 106 historic reviews, labor compliance. We also are working through the architectural drawings and the site plans, permits, and then we're negotiating with the county on executing the letter of intent that we signed, operationalizing that into a conveyance agreement. So there's a lot of parallel. Well, they're not always parallel. Sometimes they're weaving in and out and circling back. But we're trying to juggle a lot of different. The county's been an amazing partner in trying to navigate this complex web that is this project, and we're hoping, fingers crossed, if things go well, we're hoping for final approval of the various steps that need to be passed to move this project forward in late fall 2023 this year, which could enable construction to start as early as January 24. That should state January 24 to February 2025. We're not going back in time to start construction. Apologies for the for the error on that side. And when the project gets its certificate of occupancy post-inspection, the property will convey free and clear to L'Arche, who will operate it in perpetuity for its intended purpose. So again, apologies for going over with the presentation length, but hopefully you found it informative, and happy to answer any questions as time allows.
Thanks. Yeah, I do want to just give a quick kind of context setting, presentation to the committee, just so that everyone is kind of aware, how this kind of fits in with the process that CDCAC is responsible for. So again, thanks Mike and Sarah and everyone for being here tonight. As Mike mentioned, there are sort of 4 actions that we're hoping to bring to the county board, and we're aiming for the November county board meeting, which is actually why we're here talking to CDCAC in September, because we've got a very busy October and November, and I'm not sure we'd be able to fit this into our schedule. So that's kind of why you're hearing this a little bit early. But the 4 actions that we're hoping the county board will consider at the November meeting are a use permit amendment. And so Mike touched on this a little bit, but the use permit amendment will request increased lot coverage to allow for appropriate enhancements to the existing house, as well as widening the driveway to accommodate fire and EMS vehicles, and also some stormwater management improvements. We're also asking the board to approve the agreement of conveyance, which is where, as Mike mentioned, the letter of intent that was signed between the county and Habitat in 2020 stipulates certain conditions precedent before the county board can actually approve an agreement of conveyance. So basically transferring the property from the county to Habitat. So this includes fundraising benchmarks, approval by the HLRB, and ensuring that property is used by a community partner. We think we've met most of those, actually all of those benchmarks. So we're moving in the right direction to be able to request that approval from the county board. There'll also be we'll also be requesting some temporary and permanent easements in order to accommodate just certain elements of the project, again, related to fire and EMS access, stormwater management, project construction. And so, again, we're sort of still kind of working out the details about this. And then the fourth element that we're asking the county board to approve is the allocation of CDBG funding to the project. And that's really what I wanted to cover in more detail tonight as it relates to CDCAC. So we are going to be recommending up to $2.5 million in CDBG to support the project. That's up to 2.5. It could be, less depending on, and it really depends on, as Mike mentioned, there's one of the partners that they're working with, they receive some donated materials. So we're still kind of, it really depends on what materials can be donated and what labor can be donated to the project. But in order to allocate the CDBG funding to the project, the county board needs to approve an action plan amendment. So we talked about the action plan a little bit before. So this is the planning document that we submit to HUD that tells them what we're going to do for the year. So the board needs to approve an amendment to that action plan that so that we can tell HUD, hey, we want to do this project. And then they also need to approve the grant agreement. So what CDCAC really is considering tonight is whether the project contributes to the goals and objectives that are identified in our 2022 to 2026 HUD consolidated plan. And again, those are those 4 goal areas. And whether CDCAC recommends approval of an amendment to the action plan to allocate funding in support of rehabilitating the historic Reeves property. So in terms of the consolidated plan priorities that we think this project meets, both goal 1, create and sustain affordable housing. Obviously, it's providing much needed, committed affordable housing to a very vulnerable population. But we also think it meets certain priorities under goal 3, stabilizing families at risk of homelessness by providing permanent supportive housing for persons with disabilities and preventing households from becoming homeless. So I think Mike touched on this a little bit, but in terms of the next steps, as far as the CDBG funding allocation, we are working very hard with Habitat to ensure that HUD compliance is completed. There's a lot that needs to be to get done before we can ask the board to consider the amendment to the action plan. So that includes environmental and NEPA compliance and also some labor compliance considerations. Again, Habitat's been a great partner, really working diligently to make sure that these factors are considered and we're meeting the compliance factors that are needed to be able to make this recommendation to the board. And we're estimating that, if all goes as planned, that we can present, excuse me, this project to the county board at the November 11th meeting. So I think that's actually all of my slides, and we've been talking for a while, so I did want to open it up to a discussion between CDCAC and the project applicants. So if you have questions for me or for Mike or for Sarah, feel free to ask them now.
So it's a little bit of a side question. I'd love to know. I represent the Community Services Board, and it has several group homes, both for DD as well as for mental health. And I know that we have been very interested in the housing issue, which is such a challenge. And the model that you've just laid out is exactly what we have been pushing for, and we've gotten nowhere. with the county. You may be familiar with the most recent RFP. After 8 years of contract problems, the county issued an RFP for group homes. CSB took the unprecedented step of opposing the zoning change that would allow that group home, because they were going to just take 2 group homes and double them up and make it like an institution. And so my question is, you talk about the county. What interactions have you had with DHS and separately the CSB? Because I can tell you at our last CSB meeting, most members knew nothing about this. And when it came up, it was, well, what do you mean Reeves Farmhouse? And then discussions about where it was, oh, I know that house. There was no information there. And so I'm just curious as to your interactions with DHS and the board.
So I've not directly had interactions with CSB. DHS has been a part of the interagency planning group, has been briefed behind the scenes. We've met with them a few times to make sure the construction project complies with all the relevant guidance and regulations associated with this type of living arrangement. Our interaction, you mentioned zoning, this is a by right project. It is not classified from a zoning designation perspective as a group because we are under the threshold of number of residents.
8, that's what we looked at.
Yeah.
You have to change it to allow 8, more than 8. They were going to do 16.
Right.
And left it to.
And I think that part of the reason that we're focusing on 4 is just space and architecture and design. You know, we're really even though the lot, if you look at the Reeves Farmhouse, it looks enormous. When they subdivided the lot in 2015, they were thinking that this would be a private single-family home. And this is going to be, largely this is a family. We like to say this is a family. This is still going to be a family home, just a different type. But they were envisioning a non-accessible, non-service enriched housing situation. They were just thinking this is already a decent sized home, and they might want a little bit of an addition for a garage or something like that. So we were really constrained on how much we can add on to add potentially more residents, but it's also tied. I don't know if 4 is the magic number from Marcia's perspective, but I know there's also an interest in to enable that family-like living environment, keeping the numbers and the ratios somewhat a little bit smaller. Well, the ratio is the same no matter for staff to residents, but in terms of keeping it a little bit of a smaller environment, helps enable that family atmosphere. Am I stating anything?
So we are kind of how we are regulated is we can only have 4 per home based on our contracts with our Medicaid contracts. So to de-institutionalize homes. So we wouldn't be able to have a 5th person even if we tried. As far as our relationships with DHS and I wish our human services leader was here. She is the one who kind of is the liaison with those. But I do know that when we applied for this grant, it's actually last September, we did get a letter of recommendation from LaVoyce Reed, who's deputy for the disability office, and she's very aware and excited about this project. I'm not sure how they communicate with the CSB or but I do know that the Arlington County has been involved since the beginning, and like I said, has been kind of tapping our shoulder to grow because our model is so effective.
Thank you. LaVoyce is the primary staff person for the DD committee, and yet the DD committee did not know about or the letter.
Yeah.
So,
because she's been a part of the interdepartmental staff group.
Yeah.
I was just going to say that she's been involved in the interdepartmental staffing group, and she's been a huge advocate for this project, just in terms of making sure that, the priority that this is something that is much needed in the county is known to all the partners on the staff team.
Oh, the need is absolute.
So
mental health and DD.
So I'll say because this is tied with their Medicaid funding model for operation, and the construction isn't requiring anything from zoning or funding that comes from the CSB side of the ledger, so to speak. Even though this project can advance without some of that consultation, we haven't come yet. I'd be happy to answer questions or talk with any. I know you mentioned it was brought up at the last meeting. a lot of people were just learning about this. We can figure out a time to follow up and discuss at some point if that's something that the group wants.
I think the committee should do that because there's no question about this project. But moving forward, how the CSB could build on this for other homes, because as you say, the need is there, and the 1DD house that's being built by the county is, I think it was 3 million and up, and that's just county can't afford to do a couple of those each year.
And that's something that we'd be happy to talk about and just what our takeaways from this. This is a bit of a unique project because this is both a home construction project and a historic asset renovation. So there are costs associated with this project that that wouldn't necessarily apply to every single four-member home that L'Arche might envision building in the future. So there's exactly. So
I'll just add that
it's the separation of real estate from services, because the way it's set up now, when they had the RFP and a new service provider was identified, people had to move from the house they've been in for many years to a new house with the new provider. And that just does not make sense. By having real estate independent, you could change the service provider if you needed to without having people pick up and move after living there for 16 years. Sorry.
And I guess kind of to go off of what you said about sort of pairing this historic renovation project with the construction of supportive housing, like I'm pretty interested in kind of the conscious decision making to pair those two, because this is not just renovating any old house, right? This is all the cost and complication associated with a historic renovation. And I guess maybe, I can't think of a better use for, a building like this, but I'm curious to think about whether there are plans to kind of use this as a model going forward and kind of a, really good example once this is done of how this can be done elsewhere, and identifying historic buildings and promoting their use for things like this.
Sure. So this project is a bit of a unicorn, I would say. And to be honest, I can't speak in great detail to the origin story for this project. Sarah, I don't know were you at L'Arche in 2017? Yeah. Right. And I was in a different role as well. Might have been too for me actually. When this project was first conceptualized, and again, like I said, 2020 was when the letter of intent was signed. I think there are a couple things that were happening all at the same time. One was the county had really struggled to find a use for this property, and were really concerned that if they let it go vacant for that much longer, this historical asset would be lost. So they were motivated to come up with a solution, because they marketed this as just a private luxury single family, to the highest bidder, could be a private luxury single family home, et cetera. And they didn't get any bids, much less a purchase offer. So that path didn't move forward. They were really motivated once a couple other nonprofit type space proposals didn't move forward, in part because their model didn't have that sort of ongoing operational nexus with, there was a lot of different, they didn't have as many access to different funding sources to make the project work and deal with some of the complications that are associated with this specific parcel, and how those boundaries were drawn when they subdivided the parcel in 2015. Like, for example, one of the encroachments that is referenced is because the driveway is more than 100 foot long. So in order to do that, you have to have a full fire engine turnaround. You can't just keep the existing driveway that's there. We had to double the width of it. The parcel wasn't drawn wide enough to double the width of it and have the fire engine. And that led to a project kind of falling by the wayside because it absorbed some of those costs. So there was a lot of different moving pieces. I think from our perspective, it's hard to operate in Arlington County. because of the high barrier, whether it's through a partnership where we're supporting a group like L'Arche along with Homemade, or just our normal Habitat affordable home ownership. Parcels that are big enough that that type of addition don't come by often. So there was some initial explorations around different types of affordable housing on the site once the just sale and restoration didn't move forward. And what the elixir was for bringing in L'Arche, how that originally happened. But I think there was a combination. I think you look at this and you might look at the total development cost, whatever, what they end up being, which is a little bit in flux because of the great benefit of having Homemade coming in and with an indeterminate amount of donation that might be offered. The project pencils without donations, but we have the potential benefit of it coming in more cost effective. But what this is going to be is it's going to be, if you look at it just as a historic renovation, the price tag is probably a little bit more expensive than if you would just restore the home. But then there's no sustainable model for using and operating it moving forward. And is this because this is probably going to be a little more expensive than because of the historic renovation than if we would have had just a blank piece of land to be able to just build straight up and have it be fully accessible from the start and not have to adapt anything or do structural repairs of the historic building. So it'd be a little bit more expensive than we had to do that. But getting both in one project, so probably get both elements defray some of the cost of the other. So by combining the two, you're probably spending less than you would to just rehab the Reeves farmhouse, have it on its own, find some operational model for it, and then separately build another large home. And by the way, that piece of free land is not existing much elsewhere in the county. So that may not directly answer your question, but it might give some context.
Yeah, that's helpful. And question, who thought of this, right? Like, I'm just curious, but it sounds like it's gonna be really cool.
I'll also, excuse me, I just want to add that, I think Mike is absolutely right that this is definitely a bit of a unicorn, this project. The county owns the property as is. We're looking to convey the property to Habitat to be able to do this work. But I think that what I just wanted to emphasize is that while sort of pairing the two priorities of historic renovation with supportive housing might not necessarily be something that comes along every so often. Pairing the use of CDBG in support of building a group home for persons with disabilities is a great use for CDBG. The project, while Mike mentioned, is a little bit more expensive than it typically would be. It really does check all the boxes that we're looking for in these types of projects, and we don't see them a lot. So I just wanted to throw that out there that we're continually looking for creative ways to use our federal funds, because it's not often that because in the past we typically have tried to allocate funding to multifamily projects, and that's much more difficult to do than a project like this. So that's all I'll add.
And also there are other replicable. So if you look, as Caitlin mentioned, the CDBG support, that is often critical to doing that, offering it free and clear, debt free, so that all fundraised dollars can go towards supportive services and operations. But the model of the partnerships with CDBG support or some other county funding resources on maybe a private market home, won't get it for free, but if we were able to find a lot that facilitated that, that's possibly replicable, depending on how much that lot costs and how the specifics of the site. Also, the premise of county-owned land, or some other sort of joint co-location, joint development, like we could explore. There's other opportunities to explore those types of developments. I mean, there's precedent for different types, both in Arlington across the country, of Terwilliger Place is another example. It's different in terms of the population that's served, the financial structure, the scale, etc. There's a lot of different that are different with that. But the premise of co-locating a community service or supportive institution with supportive housing or residential development, that's a sound model. And so they're definitely different. When this project, we get a chance to breathe when this project is done, we definitely can like debrief and think through what worked for this that's replicable, what worked for this because of the unicorn of this project, and we can count on that, but we could definitely help think through ways to scale this up moving.
The model is used in other jurisdictions, whether it's not-for-profits, churches, where they own the real estate and then county or somebody else provides the services. So it is a known model and a successful model in other places.
Tim, you had a question.
The 2.5 for CDBG, what would that be used for? Or are we giving anything else up from?
We're not, so the grants tend to be under the public service cap, which, as you all know, can only spend up to 15% of the CDBG. So we actually have a big pot of CDBG that we're always looking for projects that, and as Caitlin mentioned, a lot of the multifamily projects that we'd like to support, we just can't because the way the federal funds work, because there's lots of reasons why it's complicated. So that's part of, I think, why Caitlin mentioned we're thrilled about this project, because it's a really great use of the fund and it doesn't come along all the time.
So this is in effect the funding that we just were briefed on paper.
This is money that we have, and we have a balance of several $1 million. So we're pretty excited to be able to use this.
Yeah, and I'll just add that we are continually getting program income through just loan repayments from just either former multifamily projects that we've loaned CDBG for, or any MyPap repayments that we're getting. And we've been getting a lot of repayments the last couple years. So we are there's a considerable amount of CDBG that we have to spend, and this is a great use of it.
We should talk to on the CSB side. We've been talking some with DHS about this sort of, because we've been trying to shop around this model or supporting group homes for years, and again, it doesn't always work. So, when there are properties that are available, when there's a good, we're so happy to be able to support that.
And I know exactly who should take the lead.
Caitlin.
No, I mean, from CSB. He's been working on this for a while.
That's great. For just editorial credit, so Caitlin and Lauren Harris from Historic Preservation have really been the county staff leading this effort. And boy, as Mike sort of alluded to, there's around every corner, there's a new complexity, and they've done an amazing job pulling in all the right people. County, it's really been an interdepartmental effort. So
yeah, I'll say we've taken on not different projects, really different structures, but similar level of complexity with other jurisdictions. I'll say the differences in terms of internal coordination at the county level versus those other unnamed jurisdictions has been like night and day. There's been a lot of things that we've needed to work through, but none of it has been because we've never had an issue that one department's not talking to the other, and we've been able to flag a lot of issues that in a normal process would have come up much later in the process and potentially derailed things, add delays, costs. We've been able to address them very early, proactively, because the county has been supportive of this project and working collectively internally to help make sure that we know what we're allowed to build and that we're making sure our plans reflect that.
Sure. What are some of the biggest risks or kind of dependencies you have to get to that construction date, get started there?
To get to the construction date, to be honest, a lot of it is a lot of blocking and tackling. So there's a lot of just check the box activities that need to be checked. One recent one that was a potential stumbling block is we just recently did logical test pits historic review, and it turns out, if it turned up something of major historic significance, the whole project could have ground to a halt while they did a full excavation and study and everything like that. Pleased to report that they did not find anything of that level of significance, so we cleared one of those potential major roadblocks. One of the things that we've been working with the county on is those easements. This is an atypical project. In the way that the boundaries were drawn, we're going to have some encroachments on the parkland, and there's not exactly a precise precedent for a lot of these things. There's no template we can pull off the shelf and say, okay, this is what the county's gonna sign, and this is what we're gonna agree to. So again, it's a lot of blocking and tackling. Everyone seems to be on the same page. We're meeting often, and so that those easement conversations are progressing, but there's always a chance that there may need to be some back and forth. And then, there's always, luckily, some of the risks that we face in some of our other projects, construction lending, interest rate risk, a lot of financing challenges. Because of the unique funding structure of this project, we're not exposed to any lending risk, any credit risks or anything like that. So if we're not borrowing, not only are we providing the housing resource debt free, and again, I just don't want it to be lost that homemade partnership is critical to being able to do that. They're not going to have any debt. We're not going to have any debt. The CDBG resources, in large part, are enabling us, if we are, if we are approved. I don't want to put the cart before the horse, but we are approved. That enables us to be able to move forward without a construction loan. To be able to finance it in that way. And right now, construction loan interest rates are 7.5 to 8% and rising. With some of our other projects, we're having to re-underwrite every couple months as we're getting towards closing. So a lot of those risks, I would say the biggest risks that we face actually are post construction start. And that is, this is a building that was built in phases from 1865 through the early 1900s. And there's only so much that we can tell until we start opening up walls. So I don't think there's any risks that we'll see in there. We've been able to do enough due diligence that we're confident that the building can be restored. But in terms of delays and that timeline, had it been presented accurately, that timeline may slip a little bit if we get in there and find there's some termite damage. Or that there's more structural shoring to the foundation than we originally anticipated. That is what I would say is the biggest risk to the project. Some of the elements of the historic reno that we're going to be facing, because really there's elements where the floors don't align. Part of the house is actually just doesn't have a foundation. The original 1865 tenant house is wood beam on dirt. So we have to figure out a way to stabilize that while we dig underneath 4 footers. And so that is why, in many ways, we're very thankful to have Homemade and the toll partnerships, because they're able to bring in sort of the people. They have a much wider network of trade partners than even we can draw in with our experience, that they can pull in to say, like, these are really complex challenges. We need people that have experience doing this sort of work. So where there are risks associated with this project, I would say another risk is, anytime you're relying on federal funding, Medicaid does tend to be a little bit more of a, you don't see too many cuts to Medicaid funding, but in an uncertain national political environment, you never want to, get too comfortable with the sustainability funding source. But as far as ongoing operating funding sources, I think that is about, from a federal perspective, about us, even if it's relatively stingy, it is at least stable.
Mm-hmm. How will you identify the residents? Or, I'm sorry, you had a different word for them.
Yeah, so core members is a term that we use. So we have an inquiry list. So people who are interested, we'll probably do kind of 2 spots at a time, just so we don't have everybody moving in at once. They ask a little bit, but it's almost like applying for a job. So we would have families apply. They'd have to have a Medicaid waiver, and usually in these situations where we interview a new core member, we have a nurse, a psychologist, member of our staff to find a good fit between what the house needs and then the greatest need as well. That is something, we're not just looking for an easy fit, we are also looking for good fit, but also where there's a significant need. So 4 spots feels like a drop in the bucket, but we do have a process we use when we do have an opening. And if you know anyone who's interested, I can give you our contact. We have a form people can fill out. So when we have an opening, let that whole list know that that's available, and then they can reach out.
Your organization is religiously affiliated, I think, but you don't,
Yes.
you don't limit your residents to any particular, okay.
No, I think it's 55 years ago when our start in France, it had roots with the Catholic Church, but now we are an interdenominational, all faiths and none are welcome.
And I'll raise this, though I'm sure you've already thought about it. Once the core members are living there, I haven't been to the site, but from what I understand, a little bit removed from the immediate neighborhood.
Yeah.
Kind of plans to make sure that the residents are integrated into the immediate neighborhood if they're not necessarily gonna like walk out the door and wave across the street.
Absolutely. So one of the things that's already been going very well is involvement with the neighborhood. We've been to their Easter egg hunt. It's a very active neighborhood, Boulevard Manor. I don't know if any or live there, or so we've already established some good connections with neighbors. I mentioned briefly the community garden that's just right off of the property, which we are excited about. Children and families coming, and then apparently, if it snows, the sledding hill is really a very loved sledding hill that thousands of people come to when it snows, if it continues to snow. So those are just a few things that actually bring property. The park is a little bit far off and down, but we also, L'Arche is known for having open houses and outdoor gatherings where we're out in the community, and a lot of neighbors walk through that property. So if we're out on the porch, even the times I've been on the property, I've met several neighbors being there. So we're actually feeling like it would be more easy to get to know the neighbors than in our current neighborhood, because it's such a unique park land, if that makes sense.
Yeah, Bruce, you built a little library at the house we live in, right? So that our neighbors could come by, and
Now we're gonna build a house.
now you're building a birdhouse. So we try really hard to make things in our yard that also interact with, and we've had some people stop in and ask how we're doing and ask about different books they've left that you've taken or that you've given. All of your Harry Potter books are now somehow around Arlington County, right? Yeah.
Sweet.
And we had some people from the neighborhood of the farmhouse come for St. Patrick's Day.
Yes.
You helped make a cake for that, right?
And
At our
Halloween
house.
too. Halloween too.
Yeah. We have lots of parties at L'Arche. We're very big into holidays, so we like to invite our neighbors to join when they can.
Right. I think we have to take action, and I'm going to ask Caitlin to use the words that you provided in the 2 bullets. So we are going to take action.
So, yeah, so I guess we're asking CDCAC 2 things: whether the project contributes to the goals that are identified in the county's consolidated plan, and whether CDCAC recommends approval of an amendment to the fiscal year 2024 HUD action plan by the county board at the November meeting.
So,
What she said.
yeah, what she said. So that is the motion.
Second.
I think we are approved and in support. Oh, wait, sorry, guys. All right, all in favor?
Aye.
All right, now we are officially.
Thank you very much. We really appreciate it, and it's a pleasure to be back with all of you after a little bit of time.
Congratulations.
And I can
Yeah, names, just so we have you all in our notes.
Sarah Moore, Bruce Weaver.
Computer doesn't want to open. Okay. Sarah Moore, Bruce Weaver,
Alice Felker.
how do you spell your last name?
Felker.
Christopher Concepcion.
Oh, you're a new with us. You're a new person.
Sorry for taking up a little bit more of your agenda than we were originally.
Thank you.
It's a great project. Thank you so much for all your work on it.
Look forward to having everybody come and visit when the farmhouse.
They would like pop tarts, please.
Yeah.
Watch your back.
Thank you.
Cinnamon green.
Someday it'll be the last day as well.
Everybody.
Welcome back.
I know, I'm glad you were so good.
Keep it quiet.
Last up, I did let the talk about the notice of funding availability and the coming review.
All right. Okay, so I'm going to try to, we are short on time. So I'm going to try to go through this relatively quickly. I do believe that most everyone in the room is familiar with this, as we haven't really updated our process too much, but that we do have some new members. So I did want to make sure that we went over basically the proposal review process and what you all have signed up for the next, couple months, starting in October. So again, I'm going to try to go through this pretty quickly, but let me just pull up my slides here. All right, so 2025 proposal review process. So as far as the schedule, proposals are due this Friday, so 2 days. We've already received quite a few. And we are hoping to have applications available for CDCAC review by September 22nd. So that's 2 weeks from September 8th. We'll also at that point have the presentation schedule available, just so that you are aware what applications will be presenting on which things. As a reminder, we are committed to meeting every Wednesday in October, starting at 6 until we're not going to go any later than, I think we've gone as late as 9:20. So I promise I won't keep you past 9:20 on any given evening. But depending on how many applications we get, we might need to push into the first week of November, so November 1st. Because I don't want to schedule too many proposal presentations in one night because, by the end of the night, people's eyes start glazing over. So once we complete all the proposal presentations, and I'll go into a little bit more about what exactly that process is going to look like each night in a couple minutes. We'll do our ranking exercise on December 6th. And that's where we go and we vote on all the applications based on, or we don't, CDCAC does, based on priority. And then you will review the budget proposal in March of next year. So that's the schedule. So everyone is aware. As far as the weekly schedule. So again, I'm going to try to get you excuse me, one second. Excuse me. As far as the weekly schedule, you should plan to try to get your questions for applications submitted in Zoom grants by Monday at noon of each week. So everyone kind of does it differently, but typically what I think most people do is they review all the applications for before each Wednesday session. So there's between 6 and 8 proposals. Review all the applications, score them, and then submit your questions by Monday at noon. As far as the answers to these questions, we put them in Zoom grants, and applicants are asked to answer all of them in writing. But some questions are going to be addressed during the actual presentation, their presentation session. But some questions will just be provided in writing. So the way we kind of split it out are, questions about budget or specific line items in their budget narrative. Those don't really lend itself to a presentation. So we just ask for those in writing, and we can kind of ask for those clarifying questions there. As far as summary sheets and final reports, so just as a refresher, summary sheets are just kind of self-explanatory. They summarize the application and includes, what they're saying they're going to do as far as their scope of work, how they're going to track the performance of their grant program. It also includes the subject matter expert comments on each application. And then the final reports are the final, if it's a applicate or program that has been funded in previous years, we also include a report, the final report from the previous fiscal year. So for this year, it will be the 2023 final report that just gives you an idea of kind of how the program did over the last fiscal year. So we're planning to share these reports with you on Tuesday, by each Tuesday at noon, and we'll actually email them to you on Wednesday morning. So they'll be posted in Zoom Grants by Tuesday, and then you'll get them in your email on Wednesday morning. You can print them, you can just pull them up on your laptop when you come to the presentation, but they'll be there for you to take a look at prior to the actual presentations. Does anyone have any questions about that before I move on? Okay. Subject matter experts. So we're going to follow a similar process that we did last year. We're going to, it's going to depend on the application, but we're going to assign subject matter experts, and to each application will have at least one person who is assigned as a subject matter expert. Some applications might have multiple. We won't assign more than 3 per application, but there are some programs that come in for funding that kind of span 2 subject matter. So we want to make sure that we're having county staff from various departments review applications that kind of cover 2 different issue areas. So an example is a job training program for a specific population. So we might have our workforce development county staff, but also the county staff that kind of work with that special population review those applications. All subject matter expert comments, again, will be added to the summary sheet, so you'll be able to see sort of what county staff looks at is looking at as when they're reviewing the application, and we'll also give you an idea of what their area of expertise is and why they were kind of selected to review this application. The reason we do this is because we want to make sure that the applications that are coming in for funding, we're not duplicating that. If they were funded, we're not sort of duplicating, funding that other county agencies could potentially be providing. We also want to make sure that, that the need that the applicant is demonstrating is, actually a need that county staff agrees is actually occurring in the community. So I think it seems like this process has been helpful in the past, so we're just going to continue and kind of expand it out to more reviewers. As far as the actual Wednesday review sessions, applicants are given a total of 15 minutes for their presentation. We ask applicants to keep their presentation time to about 5 minutes and leave at least 10 minutes for Q&A from CDCAC members. So again, during that 10 minutes, they'll be covering questions that were submitted to them previously, but also it's an opportunity for you to ask additional questions. If you don't get around to submitting your questions in advance, that's totally fine. You can save it for the Q&A portion of their presentation. And if they don't answer the questions in Zoom Grants before this actual session, then we will actually prompt them to make sure that they're answering them during the presentation. So a quick reminder that all proposal review sessions will be held in person and virtually, but CDCAC members, again, are required to participate in person. This is just due to the public meeting quorum rules. So if there's an instance where you cannot attend in person, please let me know as soon as possible, because if we don't have quorum, we can't hold the meeting, and that really is going to disappoint some of the applicants who have prepared their presentation. So please let me know in advance if you are unable to attend, because there is also an opportunity to make an all virtual meeting if we have to, if there are multiple members who can't attend on a particular night. So just keep that in mind. This year, again, we're going to be requiring applicants to participate virtually just because of space constraints and, all that. I think it's been working well. So we're going to try that again. And I think applicants kind of appreciate that because they don't have to come down to the courthouse to do their presentation. If you can't score all of the applications, then don't score any. It's okay for you to review them and participate in the presentations, but we like to make sure that when we are doing the final scoring, that there's a consistent number of scores from each of the reviewers that factors into the average. because, you know, if you score one application but not another, it skews the scoring. And also just remember to stay consistent in how you review and what you're looking for in all applications. You know, we're not here to tell you what is a 1 as compared to a 10, but as long as you're applying that, what you're, you know, how you're basing those decisions consistently throughout your review, totally fine. So just remember to try to stay consistent in that. And again, you're welcome to submit your questions in advance, but you're not required to. And so with that, I would like to do a quick tutorial. I know we're over time. So if you remember how to score applications and you want to head out, totally fine. But for the newer folks, or if you want a refresher, please feel free to stick around, and I'm going to do a quick kind of tutorial to remind you how to access the applications and get to where you need to be. And so while I'm pulling up food grants, if you have any questions, feel free to ask them now.
If you want to bail, do feel free, for those who are
Yeah.
So if we have a conflict, we can just email Caitlin and let her know.
Yes. Oh, so that's another thing. The conflict of interest forms will be emailed to you. And so you can sign those electronically and then submit it back to us, where it's just a DocuSign notification. And it basically just asks you to indicate whether you have any conflict of interest with any of the applicants. So we can't send that to you until we have a list of the applicants that have applied for funding. So this is the main login screen that you're gonna get to when you pull up your your application. And actually, sorry, I need to log into my password manager here to actually get my. But I forget what my password is. Actually, Tim, did you have a question for your hand raised there?
He was just wondering about the conflict of interest.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
Scheduling conflict.
And scheduling conflict.
Okay.
I can participate virtually.
Yeah, I mean, that's fine if you can only participate virtually versus not, then of course that you are able.
Yeah.
Again, assuming we have an in-person forum.
Yeah.
Okay, so
how many members do we have now?
we have 10 members right now. So we have actually quite a few vacancies in the general interest spot. So if anyone knows anyone who's interested in joining, send them my way. Okay, so this is the login screen that's going to pop up when you go to log into your account. When you log in, the fiscal year 2025 program is going to be under open programs. It's not there yet because the program hasn't closed and I haven't assigned any applications yet. So I'm just going to give you a quick tutorial under the 2024 application. But when you log in, you will be looking at the 2025 application. So just keep that in mind. So when you get there, you're going to end up in this dashboard, and all the presentations are going to be split out by presentation night. So you'll be able to click into October 5th or go back October 12th. And it's going to show you all the applications that are presenting on each night. But for the purposes of this tutorial, I'm going to look at a program that is one of the non-competitive programs that we provide funding to, but we still manage our program in Zoom grants, and just talk a little bit about the various contents of each proposal. So this first screen is just the application summary, the organization, the address, applicant contact, the history of what it's been approved for in the past. And you're going to toggle between these tabs up here when you're reviewing the application. So the first tab is the proposal narratives, and these are just all the questions that they are asked to respond to. And so it just kind of, there's a bunch of questions they're asked, and this one they didn't respond to all the questions because it's a non-competitive program. But the ones that you'll be reviewing will be quite longer. So that's the first section. The next is the budget, and so what you're looking at here is the first column here, or the second column here on the left is the actual community development fund requests. This is what they're specifically requesting funding for, and then the various other sources that they are going to be they've either secured or will be seeking to support the program. And so you'll be able to see down here under item total, the total cost of the project. The other thing that you'll be looking at, it's not in this one because again, they didn't submit a full application, but below the budget will actually be a budget narrative where they're asked to describe the various line items that they've included, that they've requested funding for. The next tab is the program evaluation form. And so this first table just asks to describe what specific strategies that they'll be undertaking to within their scope of work. And then the next table is their performance measures. So how are they going to be measuring the performance of their program? And so the specific performance measures here are in the left-hand column, and then the number of the ways that they'll be tracking or sort of measuring the performance is in the expected number column. The next tab is the document uploads tab, and this indicates all the various documents that we request that they submit. The only ones that are required are the ones that are marked here under the required field, so nonprofit tax system status, articles of incorporation, and current year Form 990. This year, we've also asked that the organizational budget be a required document. So in the 2025 application, you'll see that this required box is marked there as well. When you go to look up the summary sheets and the final reports, those will be under the administrative documents section down here. When you go to submit your, I'll talk about how you submit your questions in a minute, but the questions that applicants will see and where they're responding to them are going to be in this applicant questions tab. You cannot submit an applicant question through this tab. There's a different way to do that. But once you submit them to us and we review them, then staff adds them to this section. And then this is where the applicant will be answering those questions for your review. So with that, I did want to talk a little bit about this section right here, this review tools section. So when you're going to review, if you click on this, it's going to pull up a kind of side-by-side. For some reason, it's not pulling up here. So let me actually go to a different application really quickly. For some reason, the score sheet is not popping up. So I'm not sure why that is the case for this this program, but in any case, I'll kind of describe what it looks like, and then if you have any questions or can't remember, then reach out to me and we can talk about it. But basically, if you go to this review tools section, you're going to have the applicant narratives and the various elements of the proposal show up here on the right. And so it's a good way to kind of toggle between what the narratives that the applicant is responding to. And then on the left-hand side over here, there's going to be a score sheet. Again, I'm not exactly sure why it's not showing up right now, but it's probably some sort of bug in the Zoom grant system. But it'll show you the evaluation area that is being that the project is being measured against, and then there will be a drop-down box that allows you to indicate the score that you want to give to each of those evaluation criteria. I think there's maybe 12 evaluation criteria that you'll be asked to respond to. And underneath each of those criteria, there's also a box that you can submit either your notes or your questions about the application in there. So when we go and we review the questions, we look in that section. There's another section underneath that says something like committee comments. You can put your questions in there, or you can just email them to me or any member of the county staff, and we can get those recorded for consideration. So while I'm going to pause right there and see if there are any questions about any of that, and while you guys are thinking of questions, I'm going to try to go to a different program here to see if I can find an example of a score sheet, because I really don't know why that wasn't showing up before. Are there any questions?
Any indication how I think you're gonna get?
I looked in a couple of days ago and it was a lot, but it's all incomplete. Not everybody's going to submit, but there were, a lot. Yeah.
A lot.
40-ish is what we've been getting the last few years, which is a lot.
Definitely.
Okay. Okay, so this is, again, this is what it looks like in terms of the score sheet. So the score sheet will be here, and you'll kind of toggle between the scores that you want to provide under each of the review elements. And then again, you can add your questions in these comment boxes, or you can add your questions down here in the My Committee Review and Scoring Comments section. One note, and this is very important, please do not put your comments or questions in this My Private Notes section, because there's a little comment field here. Your notes will not be viewable to anyone else, and that includes admin staff. So if you put your comments here, I'm not going to be able to see them. So we want to be able to see the questions, and if you have other comments that you just want to use to help you review it, that's fine. But if there is a question that you have of the application, make sure that it's in one of these other fields so we can actually see them and record them in the for the applicant. Let's see, anything else? Oh, another thing that you should know is that if you wanted to print or at least download the applications, you can go up here to this print or preview screen. So if you click on that, it's going to pop the application out into a separate tab, and then you can either email this to yourself, save it as a PDF right here, print it. If you save it as a PDF, it's going to end up in your downloads, and then it'll just turn it into a nice PDF that you can then either review or print or save or whatever you want to do with that for your records. I know there are some of you who like to print the applications, so I thought I'd mention that. Any questions? All right. Well, I'm not hearing anything. So I think once we get this record, we are recording the meeting. I'm going to put it up on the website. I'll send it to you all so that you have it for when you're reviewing, in case you need to go back and rewatch the demonstration. But otherwise, if you have any questions, feel free to send them to me or Jennifer or Rolda or Zena. And yeah, we're excited to get started in just about a month.
Great.
All right. So Laura, I'm going to turn it back over to you.
Right. Okay. Normally do staff report. Anything for you guys?
Can't think of anything.
Member reports? Anything from anybody else? And I'll say two really quick things. I'd like to introduce Christopher Concepcion. Hopefully by next month, he will be officially on board as a CDCAC member. Thanks for coming today. And my other point to make is, as we've heard, we have currently 10 members on the committee. So I would encourage you all to talk about CDCAC with your people, your professional networks, your local networks, and have people know what that is. Maybe are potentially interested. As you know, there's specific slots that people have to fit into in terms of general interest or commission liaisons or low income interest, but we had kind of a bench of interested people sort of waiting in the wings for when slots come open. I think that would be a really good thing. So that's my little plug right there. Okay, with that, sounds like we can adjourn.
All right.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Thanks, everyone.
All right.
Good one.